how do we, as a coach, effectively navigate or guide the coaching conversation? Well, one of the most effective ways is to use the Double Diamond model. And a bit of a history of this Double Diamond. It is actually a design thinking framework of how people problem solve effectively. And it was developed in the early 2000s. So the first diamond that you see, which says discover and define, represents the problem. The second diamond, develop and deliver, represents the solution. So in the past, when there is an issue that occurs, instead of assuming what the underlying issue is, the designer will actually, like speak to different users, gather all their input with the different stakeholders in the discovery process. And with all that data, okay, they will start to actually define what the actual problem is or what the problem behind the problem is. So once they come to that, that's when they have the design brief. And with the design brief, that's in that design brief, it clearly states, what issue are they clearly addressing. And then they move on to the second diamond, which is to develop. So in a development phase, what happens is that they will, like ideate, they will brainstorm different ideas on how they could solve the problem. And as they brainstorm and ideate, they will come to the delivery stage where they will prototype the test out different solutions at small scale. And for those that don't work out, they throw it out. For those that really work, they will improve on it. And it's an iteration process until they finally come to a solution that really works, that addresses this, this problem behind the problem. And with that, that is a double diamond process. So likewise in coaching, we use this similar process in our coaching conversation. So typically when a client first steps into a coaching conversation with a coach, they will bring in a challenge or they'll bring in a presenting issue. And our job is to not immediately assume what the issue is. And that's when we go into the explore phase. So similar to the example I shared earlier, you want to start to gather data about the presenting issue, gather more data from the client. And how do we do that? We use the CCI model. So we explore the current, what's happening with the client right now, what's the situation, how are they feeling about it. We will explore the change. What have they done? What have they tried? What are the obstacles they have faced? And what is the ideal? What is it that they really want? So once we have covered CCI fully, we would have thoroughly help the client to explore the presenting issue. And with that, it's time for us to move into the next phase, which is the convergence part. So a coach might ask a question, what might be useful to work on today? And with all these data being unpacked, the client might, say, hey, I'm beginning to see that actually it's really about this issue. So what we're trying to do is to get the client to come to a focal point of what's the crux at hand. What is the thing that they're trying to address? And some questions that the coach might ask would be any of these. What would you like to get out of today's session? What would you like to leave today's session with? And what we're really trying to do here is to co-create with the client. What exactly does success look like? What exactly is important for you to walk off today with? And it has to be clearly articulated, and aligned between both coach and client. Because with that, we'll then move on to the second diamond, which is to explore, and really to explore like what explore data surrounding this objective for today. And one of the guiding questions that we can ask and help to open up the exploration is, where should we start this discussion to get it to X, where X is the outcome of the learning point or the session goal. Okay, and in this exploration phase, our role as a coach is really to help the client to, like unpack and see new data that they previously were not aware of. Because with that new data and that new data gives rise to new perspectives. And as they start to realize new things about themselves, about the situation, that's when it's important for us as a coach to help them to crystallize. So some of the questions that a coach can ask is, what are you learning so far from all of this? And as the client articulates their learnings and their crystallizations, they will be at a space, typically to take on the next steps. And that's when we tilt over into the create phase. The create phase is all about, like what's next, what does the next steps look like to get them to the outcome. So some questions could be like, how are you taking this forward? Or, what's next for you right now as you are beginning to realize all of this. Okay, and the creation phase is something that the client will share, and to wrap it all up, we'll want to actually check in with the client at the end of the session, like, what are they taking away from today? What are they learning? What have they realized? So with this, what we are seeing is actually a full end-to-end double diamond process of how a coaching conversation works. So here we have an example of how a sample coaching conversation might look like as it progresses using the double diamond model. So in this example, the client comes in with a challenge. The client says, oh my, I'm overwhelmed with my current work and I'm even working during weekends and I'm feeling really burnt out. So the coach is not going to take the presenting issue as it is. The coach will help the client to unpack using CCI. like what's the current, how are you feeling about it? How's it impacting you? Checking on the change, like what have you tried? What's the obstacles? What really needs to be addressed? And then, of course, the ideal. And through that, the client might say, in the exploration phase, oh, you know what? I find myself spending time on urgent requests from my colleagues, and these requests are not even part of my job scope. But I know I shouldn't be doing that, but I can't reject them. So if we have explored enough around CCI as a coach, we can help them to start to move into the defined stage by asking them, what might be useful to work on today. And the client might, share a bit more and say, I can't seem to say no to these urgent requests, especially when they need my help. And through that conversation, the client will eventually land onto a focus for this session for today. And this session objective might look like, how can I start setting boundaries for myself at work so that I can care for my well-being? And this has to be clear to both coach and client. And the coach might say, okay, so where should we start? And the client comes in to say, okay, let's start with the urgent request that I've spent the bulk of my time last week. Okay. And in the explore phase of the second diamond, the coach will be asking questions to help the client to see new data about the situation or about themselves, and with all that new data, there will be new perspectives, new realizations. And at this point, the coach will check in with the client on, what are you learning about this so far? And it's really to help the client to crystallize the wisdoms, that they're getting for themselves. And with that, we move into the create phase, where it's really about next steps, what's next, And in this phase, it's not only about designing actions, but it's also about, accountability or even preempting obstacles that might stop them from taking the action. So in this case, the client might say, you know what, I commit to arrange a conversation with colleague A about how her requests are affecting me. And as the client, comes to clarity about the next steps that leads them to their outcomes, we can close off the session by checking them like, how's the session useful for them today? And with that, this marks an example of how a coaching conversation goes through the Double Diamond process.